Hello teacher! Welcome to another video here from our program, The Digital English Teacher. And today with this video, I would like to talk about a very interesting topic, conversation classes. So when we teach a group, when we teach an individual, sometimes we get this demand, we get this request. Oh, Fredo, I'm looking for an English course, but I would like to have conversation classes. I don't want to follow a book. I don't want a traditional course, traditional course with a course book. Suppose a student comes to you with a request like that. From time to time, that might happen. So I'm interested in a conversation class. So last week we had our master class, the Digital English Teacher, in which I talked about resources on the internet that I think a digital English teacher should have a good understanding and a good command of in order to offer, in order to give his students a good class. And then during that master class, somebody asked me a question in the chat, but during the master class, I didn't have enough time to provide an answer to that question. So that person was instructed to get in touch with us later so that I could offer her a more comprehensive answer. So anyway, 1 or 2 days later, she contacted us through our Instagram account and posted a question. And the question was like this. Alfredo, I have a student, a 12-year-old girl, and she's interested in conversation classes. I think maybe this is some sort of a demand that comes from the parents. Maybe her parents want her to have a conversation class, just conversation. And then this teacher was asking me, so Alfredo, what do you think? Do you think I can offer this student a conversation class? And then I want you to take a look at a video that I found on the internet. And I think this video, in a way, it kind of answers that question. I want you to take a look at that and tell me later on what you think. You can put comments in the comment section of this video. So let me just give you a quick overview of what this video is all about. So the IELTS organization, they have a test called Life Skills. I didn't dive into the specifics of this test, but from what I understood, because a student of mine who's actually going to take the test explained to me that she got married to a guy who lives in England, and I think he's Brazilian, but he's got an European passport and they can live in England. But because she's going to enter the country as a kind of immigrant, okay, she has to go through a screening process. The British immigration authorities will conduct a series of tests with her. One of them is an English test, and she's supposed to show the examiner that her level, her understanding of the language is good enough so that she can enter the country. Notice that even though this test is organized by IELTS, the same organization that applies proficiency tests for students who wants to do a master's or a PhD course in countries like Canada, England, New Zealand, Australia, and so on. Now, this is a simpler test, okay? It's not as complex as an IELTS test for university. Anyway, so this video that I'm going to show you shows 2 Chinese students who are taking the test. It's a speaking test. Okay, so basically that's it. I want you to take a look at it.
Now I'd like you to ask each other some questions.
Okay.
Jessica, I'd like you to ask Lily about watching television.
Okay.
And Lily, I'd like you to ask Jessica about shopping. Now, think about the questions you want to ask. You have 1.5 minutes to prepare. You can write down your questions if you want to.
Yeah.
Please ask Lily your questions.
Okay. Which program do you like?
Program.
Program.
Television program?
Yeah.
Television program.
Okay, guys. So basically, that's it. So I showed you this video as a demonstration of my initial response, my initial answer to that question. So, as you could see, the examiner, Sally, asked the two Chinese girls to prepare some questions to each other. So, as Jessica was supposed to ask Lily about watching TV, and Lily was supposed to ask Jessica about shopping. They had 1.5 minutes to prepare their questions, and then once they had prepared their questions, they asked each other. Okay, so that seemed simple enough. And I stopped the video at the very first question because Jessica asked Lily the following questions. Which type of TV programs do you watch? And Lily didn't understand or didn't know the word programs. The examiner tried to help, saying, okay, TV programs, see if she could help. But apparently, Lily could not understand. Okay, so my point is, how can you have a conversation with someone with that kind of limitation? So, that would probably suggest me that I should answer that it's not possible to have a conversation class with a student, for example, a 12-year-old girl whose English is very basic, whose knowledge of the language is either non-existent, like she has no knowledge whatsoever, or has a very limited knowledge of the language. So the answer should be, well, no, you cannot teach a conversation class to a student like that. But then, again, I think that was my initial response, my initial answer. But then I thought this through, and I came up to a different conclusion. Well, first of all, I think we have to establish what one understands by a conversation class, because a conversation, I think, could be defined as exchange of information between two people talking to each other, exchanging information, asking questions, answering questions, asking and answering questions, exchanging information, offering opinions, debating on subjects, or simply talking about a subject. But I think that in order for a conversation to take place, you need at least two people, two participants, and there has to be an exchange. So how can there be exchange if one of them has such limited knowledge of the language, such limited vocabulary? So it sounds almost obvious that you cannot have a conversation class with a student like that. But having said that, I would say that I think that even a student, right, with no knowledge of the language whatsoever, who comes to you saying that he's interested in conversation classes, that he doesn't want a traditional class, basically what he's saying to you is that he doesn't want to follow a traditional method with a course book and reading exercises and grammar exercises and all the kind of stuff that we find in a traditional course. I think what that student wants is have an interaction with someone in English, and by interacting and speaking in and listening to the language, they can learn. Well, I think that's possible. So what I would say, my answer to that question then is this. My understanding is that when a potential client comes to you, regardless of their level, saying that they want a conversation class, okay? And then, of course, let me correct this. Of course, that if you have a student at an intermediate level, of course, he wants to improve his conversation skills. But if we're talking about a beginner, now that student is interested in having a class in which the teacher speaks to him or her in English only, and that no course book or traditional course book is involved. And then I would say that I think it's possible, even at very lower levels. Okay, so for instance, suppose I were to show to my student, okay, a scene like that. Okay, so let me just minimize my picture here. And suppose that I were to show to my students a scene like that. And then I would say, okay, suppose that my student's name is Jennifer or whatever. And then I say, okay, Jennifer, so I know that your name is Jennifer. My name is Alfredo. But let's watch that video. So look at those two girls. What are their names? and then I could point to the girl wearing a dark sweater, okay, and then we would watch the video, and then my student would listen the name Lily, and would say, "Well, you see, you heard? See, my name is Alfredo, your name is Jennifer, but her name is Lily." And then I would ask, "Okay, what about the other girl? So what is her name?" "Ah, okay, her name then is Jessica." So you see, I think it's possible for you to create an environment for your student in which you present to her pictures and images and things like that. And in doing so, then you can teach. For example, introductions like this. You can explain how you talk about your name and other people's name by demonstration, by giving them examples, and then getting them to repeat, to interact with you. If this is a one-to-one class, you can play the role of the teacher and also play the role of another participant who can interact with that student. So in a situation like that, that's what you would do. You would point to an image like that, you would play the video, and then you would ask questions. Okay, so look, let's talk about names. My name is Alfredo. Your name is Jennifer. And what about that girl in the black sweater? Ah, okay, her name is Lily. What about the other one? Oh, her name is Jessica. So my answer to your question, is it possible to have a conversation class with a beginner student? Yes, I think it's possible if we agree that by conversation we mean that the only tool as a teacher that I'm going to use when I'm teaching this student is speaking. In other words, is the language, the conversation, like this oral exchange, this oral interaction. As long as we establish that this constitutes some form of conversation class for a very low level student, then yes, it is possible. I think it is possible. In my case, I mean, because of my beliefs on how we should approach language teaching, I would do this 100% in English. I would expose the student to the language, but I think it's very important to establish something, to make something very clear. I think that a lesson like that, it's a very challenging job for the teacher. It requires more in terms of planning, in terms of strategy, and I think that you have to have in mind what kind of setting you're going to have for that class, because you're going to need to make this class very visually appealing to your student. Because if you're not going to have a book to support you, if you're not going to have text to support you, if you're not going to use the traditional methods, you have to have something. And I think that the visual appeal is the right tool to use, and that's what I would do. So my answer to that question, okay, so as I said, during a master class, somebody posted a question like that, and that would be my answer. I think it is possible. It's very challenging. It requires a lot of planning. It requires a lot of strategic moves, but I think it's possible. And if you succeed, because I think that depending on the student, right, a class like that might fail. But I think that if this class is well planned, there's a good chance you might get good results. And like I said, it's a challenging experience for the teacher, but it can also be a very rewarding one. So I would try that. You know, I've never done that, but I would definitely try it, and I would go for it following the steps that I proposed here. So that was my answer. That is my answer to this question. I hope you found it useful. And that's it. My name is Alfredo, and this is our program, The Digital English Teacher. So feel free to leave a comment in the comment section of this video. Make sure to subscribe to our channel, and share if you can to people that you know, I mean, colleagues, people who work with the language, people who you feel might benefit from watching this video. Okay? See you again in our next episode of this program, The Digital English Teacher. Bye-bye.